I hope these are all on. They are. Terrific.
Yes, they are.
All right. Well, what a great crowd. And I think there's a lot to say. I'm Terry Tamminen. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I know it was all for me. I want to get right into this because Commissioner Hedegaard is on a bit of a tight schedule, but it's very important actually for this group to create a transition because what we just heard was a very focused statement of the problem and of what we're going to have to adapt to. And we're going to hear from Governor Schwarzenegger later about some of the solutions and the mitigation that we can take that might be a more hopeful picture. But in between, we have Commissioner Hedegaard, who deals with this every single day, who is trying to find ways to find the nexus between adaptation and mitigation and hope and despair and policy solutions and technical solutions. But one of the other things that she's a great visionary on, like the governor, is getting the public engaged in actually making this a movement that gets everyone engaged in solutions. And that's part of what she wants to talk about tonight, and Governor Schwarzenegger does as well before we get into the second half of the program. So, Commissioner Hedegaard, with that, may I turn it over to you?
Thank you very much. And congratulations to Sustainia. We're also here in order to celebrate a new initiative. And of course, as Commissioner for Climate Action, I think that it's great when somebody takes the initiative to try to communicate what kind of solutions there are out there. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago when I came to the United States, I thought when I saw this cover page of Time magazine with some polar bears and some melting ice sheets, I thought, well, now awareness is coming because people can, through that kind of pictures, they can get awareness, something is happening. But I would say that was more like climate 1.0. Now we need to come to climate 2.0. And we need to move from awareness. I know there are a few pockets in the world where awareness is not good enough yet, but basically we have to move from awareness now to action. And that is sort of also what we try to do in the European Union, to try to find out both on adaptation and mitigation. What can we actually do? And there, of course, melting poles will not be enough to make people change the way they live their life or make some other choices in their daily life. There you have to sort of show to them that you can have an intelligent life, a smart life, a fun life, a creative life, if you apply some more sustainable solutions. I used to be a journalist, and in journalism we have this saying, don't tell it, show it. And I think that that is what we have come to now, show it. I do not know if I have time just to mention one example in Europe. Some of you have heard that we have an economic crisis in Europe. That's taken quite a lot of our time. But we are also starting very much to discuss how do we exit that crisis? What kind of growth do we need in order to exit the crisis? One example, last year, 2011 in Europe, we imported oil, not gas, not everything else, just oil, for 315 billion euros. Now you would say, that sounds like a lot of money, but how much money is it? Well, it's almost the size of the Greek debt. Then you will know it's a lot of money. So 315 billion euros spent. We have a deficit, trade deficit in Europe of 150 billion euros. So how wise is it to continue to pour money into Middle East regime, into different other systems, so that they can sort of have the growth that they need, instead of us investing a bit more in a more energy efficient and resource efficient society? And if we did so, retrofitting buildings, retrofitting pipes, things like that, we could create jobs. Jobs that we need right now in Europe, jobs that cannot be outsourced to China or elsewhere. So that's the way we try to discuss climate 2.0 now in Europe. Climate change is also about energy and resource efficiency. It's about more intelligent solutions, and it's about how we create the growth of the future. So that is how I would very much like to welcome this initiative. Show the solutions. It's not about a gray and black future. On the contrary, it's colorful, it's interesting, it's intelligent, whereas if we continue business as usual, then we are in for something very gray and very black.
Thank you very much. I think the European Union needs a climate action commissioner who's more passionate and animated, don't you? I mean, that was fantastic. Governor, you know, the Sustainia Awards is really a fascinating concept and the entire initiative because it does shine the spotlight on good solutions and on innovation, and just like the Oscars or bodybuilding trophies that you may have won in the past, it inspires people to take more action. Do you think that can work? Is that transferable when you go from, say, the movies or bodybuilding or those types of examples when you come to something like climate change? Can awards and ways for people to envision a future really make change?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that that award is a great idea, and I think it's always good when you hand out awards and when you, you know, reward people for great work that is done. And but it's one out of many things that need to be done. As you know, I'm a big fanatic about communication because I think that, and I think that Connie hit the nail on the head, that we got to really communicate to the people and, you know, really reach out and bring them into the movement, because obviously government alone cannot do it. If it is local government, even though the R20 that we have started, it's all about subnational governments, but they alone cannot do it. The federal governments cannot do it. The UN alone cannot do it. I think everyone has to work together in this movement, and we have to communicate and let the people know, not only kind of talk about guilt and talk to them about, you know, this is terrible to sit in a jacuzzi because, you know, there's greenhouse gas emissions, or it's terrible to drive with this truck because there's greenhouse gas emissions, so it's terrible for you to fly with the plane because there's greenhouse gas emissions, but to talk about the good things that are going on. Like, for instance, there's the Geneva car show that is here right now. Well, the people don't have an idea that, for instance, there's a whole pavilion out there of green cars. So we, the R20, are going to organize an event, a press event, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, at 9 a.m., to go and put the spotlight on green cars so the people all over Switzerland and all over Europe get to see that there's 50-plus cars out there that are green, that are getting 65 miles per gallon. And that is extraordinary performance. And so we see the car manufacturers now slowly kicking into gear and start producing alternative fueled cars, which is so important. But you see, they can have their pavilion out there from here to eternity. But if you don't communicate that, and if you don't put the spotlight on it, you have nothing. And so my point always is, and I come from the marketing background, and I've gone through, you know, putting the spotlight on things, if it is, you know, fitness and going through the whole fitness crusade and promoting my movies and everything. If you don't communicate right, you have absolutely nothing. No one will buy your product. You can have the best product in the world, but no one will buy it because no one will know about it. So those are the kind of things I think that's very important to do, and that's what we, the R20, are all about, is to go and see those holes that we have in this whole environmental movement and try to fill those holes and be more inclusive, and as I always say, to make the whole movement more sexy and more attractive, more hip, so that everyone becomes part of it, and not to make people believe that government will take care of you and government will take care of the solutions, but it is you. Each and every one of you has to ask yourself all the time that question, what do I do personally? And this is why it's also important for us to communicate what you can do, in fact, personally on a daily level.
That's a great message. That's worth a round of applause, absolutely. Professor Beniston, you work with students every day, of course, here at the University of Geneva. And do you think this message resonates with them? And by the way, after the second half of our program, which will be Governor Schwarzenegger's remarks, we will take some questions from students because it's important to engage that next generation. But do you think that they're listening to this, or do they feel that this is someone else's problem? I mean, after all, our generation created it. We're going to hand it off to them to solve it.
No, they're very much aware of the problem, and I think they're aware of the complexities of not just the climate problem, but all the other issues that are probably going to converge, you know, the energy crisis within the next 20 or 30 years, real climate change that will be taking a bite on the environment within the next 20 or 30 years, health problems associated with that. So I think we are communicating the fact that we have to look at these issues in a holistic manner, not just look at climate as a physical element of the system, not just look at economics, not just look at health, but look at them in an integrated manner.
And Commissioner Hedegaard, I mean, do you think that that regardless of communicating this, regardless of how many people we get involved, that we're ultimately going to get our countries to take the kind of concerted action that will facilitate this movement and basically have governments helping their own people to facilitate these changes?
Yes, I think that ultimately that will happen. But there is this bad habit for the human race, that it is as if we always need to go to the absolute brink of something before we sort of do what is needed to avoid catastrophe. And I mean, we really have to get our act together now. I agree very much. It's a much more sort of holistic thing. Just to give a few facts, according to the UN, 18 years from now, I mean, we're not talking about generations, 18 years from now, we will need at least 50% more food, because we become more people, but also more people will enter the very consuming middle classes. At least 45% more energy, at least 30% more water. I think that most people can see that if we're not creating another kind of growth where we get more output out of less input, then we are in for really, really big trouble. So I think that governments will get their act together internationally, nationally, regionally, as the governor was talking about. We see a lot of municipalities, they start to move now. Why? Because also their citizens will say this makes sense and we expect it from you. But I agree very much with what the governor was saying, that we can create the framework. We can get the targets right, the pricing mechanisms right, the taxing systems to create the right incentives, things like that. Politicians have their responsibility. But in the end, it is the science community that must provide sort of basic knowledge that we can act on, new technological solutions. Companies will have to make these solutions available. We have a lot of solutions now, but it's not disseminated enough. So we need to take the solutions that we have to scale. And then I think that it's incredibly important, the point about the responsibility that each of us have in the daily choices we make. Each day, each of us send clear signals to those who are producing the different goods that we demand. And we have a huge power there. So politicians, citizens, companies, all of us have our respective responsibility in this.
And Mr. Giraud, I mean, you obviously work with an organization that is created to measure things, to look at systems and how they work. And from your presentation, it's clear that you have a great view of that. Do we have enough information to feed it back to policymakers and to citizens so that they understand that there's only so much time left and really how much time that may be?
Actually, we do measure. We do more than measuring.
But you do at least that.
You see, to make decision, you need to start. You cannot manage what you don't know. So knowledge starts with observation. Observation has to be transformed into information, into products which are suitable for decision making. And indeed, what I presented in my just a few minutes ago was an initiative which is exactly to address the question you have been asking. Right now, there's not enough information often, or information in a form which is not quite suitable for making decision. So we are working on that to provide decision makers at all levels, regional levels, global levels, but also to the fishermen, to the farmers, with information that they can use to make decisions in climate-affected areas. It is a big challenge, but it is something that where we have made huge scientific progress over the last 20, 25 years. Just one example, 25 years ago, it would not have been possible to predict the onset and development of El Niño phenomena, which affect many countries. Now it is possible because of this scientific progress has been huge. But this has to be translated into final products to make decision. So yes, we are working on that. We are confident, but time is not on our side. You see, in Copenhagen, I was discussing with a number of representatives of small islands, and they said the target of 2 degrees globally is not enough. We need 1.5 degrees. I said, yes, I agree. However, the laws of physics are against you. 1.5 degrees is essentially no longer feasible because we have injected too much greenhouse gas in the atmosphere already. We cannot achieve 1.5 degrees unless we can remove quickly, not reduce emission, remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And we know technology is not yet quite there for that. But even 2 degrees was a challenge in Copenhagen. 2 degrees is now even more difficult. And if we don't take quick action, 2 degrees is on the verge of being impossible. So back to your question, even for that, to inform that decision, we need to provide better and better information. And this is what we are trying to do.
Well, time is not with us on this section of our program this evening either, but thank you for that clarity. It's clear that there is no time to waste. And so with that, I'd like to invite you all to thank this panel. We're going to move on to Governor Schwarzenegger's presentation, but please give them a great big round of applause for that wonderful context. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to turn the podium over to Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Well, thank you very much for your great introduction. I'm all pumped up to be here today at the University of Geneva with the future leaders of Switzerland and of Europe, and hopefully also of our green energy revolution. But before I go on with my speech, I just want to say thank you to a few people, like Michel Saban, who is the president of R20, then Christophe Natal, who is the executive director of R20, Linda Adams, who was the head of our EPA, who is sitting out there, and also Terry Tamminen, who you heard just out here, and this is his birthday today. Let's give him a big applause for. You don't look bad for a guy 80 years old. But anyway, then Connie Hedegaard, we want to thank her for being here today with us, who is the European Commissioner, of course, for climate action. And then, Rector Vasali from this university, the University of Geneva, and then Michel Gerard. We want to thank all of them and so many of the volunteers that have helped put this event together. And I know there was a big scramble there, because there was not enough room in this hall, and then there were now 5 other halls and rooms that were made available. So this is really terrific to see so many enthusiastic people here. Anyway, even though I have to say that I am a proud Austrian and I love my home country, I've always been a big admirer also of Switzerland. I look at this tiny country that you barely can find on a map, and then you look at the huge things that you're doing. I mean, I'm really amazed by that. You are the best in so many things, and your influence is many times larger than your country. And earlier this year, I saw your Swiss power firsthand at the Hahnenkamm race in Kitzbühel. I mean, in downhill skiing, it's considered one of the greatest challenges. It has been called the most dangerous downhill race in the world, where they go 95 miles an hour. And of course, who won? Not an Austrian. The Swiss legend Didier Kutsch. And not only did he win, but he also won for the 5th time, which broke the all-time record held by one of Austria's own legends, and my very dear friend Franz Klammer. So it is fantastic to be here in a country that knows all about success. Now, I love this place, and it's also great shopping, and of course, you have great watches. I mean, I'm wearing a Swiss watch right now, the Audemars Piguet, and then, of course, you always have to have also a watch, a pocket watch. This is Richard Mille, also a Swiss watch, so I'm backed up all the way with Swiss stuff. Anyway, I just finished filming my new film, Last Stand it's called. And very soon I will start filming my next film called The Tomb with my great friend Sylvester Stallone. Now, I've always said that when I'm finished with politics and finished with the governorship, that I will go back filming. And I'm loving every minute of it. I mean, it feels so great again to be on a movie set, and to run around and race with cars and shoot the bad guys. There's explosions and shootouts and all kinds of special effects. But that's all movie magic. But what we are talking about here today is reality. And it's serious reality. And I tell you why I say that, because the US Department of Energy just reported that in 2010, the global output of carbon dioxide has jumped by 6%. The world has literally pumped 500 million more tons of carbon dioxide into the air than it did in 2009. And our challenge isn't shrinking. Every day our population is growing. Last year, the world's population hit 7 billion. And in 14 years, it's expected to pass 8 billion. At the same time, more and more people are moving into urban areas. More and more people are embracing the joy of driving a car. And more people are using electricity to improve their lives. And therefore, more and more people are polluting. Our task is daunting, and it is growing exponentially every minute we wait. But that's the bad news. There's also good news. The good news is that it is fantastic things are happening all over the world. For instance, the European Union has committed to cutting emissions by at least 20% below the 1990 levels by the year 2020. Germany is producing 17,000 megawatts of solar power a year. And here in Switzerland, you're getting more than 60% of your energy from renewable sources. And in my native Austria, there's great things happening there, especially in a little town called Güssing, where they went from being unable to pay the power bill 15 years ago to creating all of its own energy with renewables today. And in Norway, they're almost at 100% of renewables. And in Oslo alone, they cut energy use by 70% by installing energy-efficient streetlights. And I was just in India, and I found that Delhi, one of the biggest cities in the world, has converted all of their taxis and buses to natural gas, which produces 60% less greenhouse gases than oil. And of course, we in California, we have done historic things ourselves. When I was governor, when I was elected in the beginning, I remember I promised the people of California that I would protect the environment and I would pump up the economy. Now, some tried, of course, to dismiss this by saying, come on, Arnold, he's driving this gas-guzzling Hummers. Plus, there's an R in front of his name. He's a Republican. Those are just empty campaign promises. Well, what they didn't know was that my Hummers were running on biofuel and on hydrogen. And when it comes to the environment, there is really no right and left. There's only one way to go, and it is forward. And that's exactly what we did in California. We marched forward. So we put together a great team with the public sector and the private sector, Republicans and Democrats, community organizations and universities, labor and businesses, and we all worked together. And believe me, there was a lot of action. We started building the hydrogen highway right from the beginning to provide fueling stations for hydrogen-fueled cars. And then we passed the tailpipe emission reductions, which then was adopted by the Obama administration on a national level. So that shows you what power subnational governments actually have. Then we did the 1 million solar roofs. Then the renewable portfolio standard, moving our renewables to 33%. And then we did our historic climate change law, AB 32, where we made a commitment to reducing our greenhouse gases by 25% by the year 2020 and 85% by the year 2050. And our green economy has boomed. The green sector has produced 10 times the jobs of any other sector in California and has attracted 67% of the green tech venture capital in the United States. So California is getting all this venture capital, even though 67%, even though we only represent 10% of the United States. There are examples of great action everywhere you look. But still, I have a major concern because there are some who are frozen. There are countries and states and cities and people who think that we can't create a green energy future without an international agreement. And I am on a crusade to change that. So if you don't mind, I would like to share my 4 suggestions for how we can make our green vision become a reality. First of all, banish the word impossible from your vocabulary and do it right now. Impossible doesn't exist for us. It's an excuse to stay on the sidelines. It is a dirty word that the naysayers love to throw around, but it doesn't mean anything to our clean energy future. Of course, I personally have heard so many times the word impossible and totally ignored it. When I wanted to move to the United States, they said, well, that's impossible. When I wanted to be a bodybuilding champion, they said, an Austrian? You can be maybe a ski champion, but not a bodybuilding champion. That's impossible. When I wanted to be a leading man in movies, they said again, it's impossible. With your accent, with your overdeveloped body, and with your name Schwarzenegger or whatever it is, it's impossible. And then, when I said I'm going to run for governor, I want to be governor of the great state of California, they said again, it's impossible. You have to start little. You have to start as a city manager or as a mayor or maybe as a state assemblyman or something like that, but not as governor. That's impossible. Of course, I always ignored this word impossible. I believe what Nelson Mandela said. He said, things always seem to be impossible until someone does it. And that's exactly what I've done. I've always done it. Which brings me to number 2, and that is don't wait. Don't wait for anybody. You will never get where you want to go by sitting on the side of the road and waiting to be rescued. Whatever you're waiting for, if it's an international agreement or federal action or anything else, stop right now. Hope for those things, yes, but don't wait on them. I hope there's an international agreement, a Kyoto 2, just as much as anyone else. Believe me, I love sequels. I come from the movie business. So of course, and I know that if anybody can bring all of the nations together, it is UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who is a great leader and a great visionary. But there isn't just one path to a green energy future. There are many ways to get there. I believe that we must continue to move forward at the subnational level. And the states, the provinces, the cities, the private sector, the academic sector, the non-profits, and all of the individuals. We should be defined by our movement, by our action, not by our hesitation. And the third, and probably the most simple thing, we need to communicate better. And I talked earlier about the importance of communicating. We need to inspire this kind of action all over the world. And that is my mission. I won't stop until we have spread and communicated our green revolution everywhere. And this is nothing new for me. It's nothing new for me because that was the same with the fitness crusade. When I started bodybuilding, I remember I wanted to win trophies. I wanted to have the most perfectly developed body. I wanted to win Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe and Mr. World and all of those titles. But as time went on, bodybuilding became something much more to me. I didn't want to just spend time in front of the mirror and train for myself and lift for myself. I wanted to lift the entire sport. I wanted to inspire the world to be healthy and fit. I wanted everyone to feel as great as I did. So I did everything that I could to spread that message. I wrote books on fitness, I did documentaries like Pumping Iron, and I did seminars and lectures and speeches all over the world. And let me tell you something, our crusade, our fitness crusade was successful. Because today there are gymnasiums everywhere you look, in hotels, in military bases, hospitals, office buildings, sports teams, in universities, in high schools, everywhere. In fact, the first thing that I did when I checked in at a hotel here in Geneva, I asked the hotel staff to show me the gym. And let me tell you something, they brought me to a fantastic gym where I could get a full workout. Now, 30 years ago, I guarantee you could have looked around from hotel to hotel, there would have been no place where there was a gymnasium. Because I remember when I traveled around the world 30 and 40 years ago. So fitness, of course, was my crusade. I worked on it for decades. Now, this is my crusade. Now I want everyone to know the benefits of clean, green energy. I want everyone to know that they can accomplish what we did in California, or what they're doing in Switzerland, or what they're doing in Norway, or in Austria or in any other place where there's great success. I want everyone to know that they don't have to wait for an international agreement in order to go and move forward. They don't have to wait for federal laws in order for us to move forward. Remember that the most powerful movements in human history, from the American Civil Rights Movement to the movement to end apartheid in South Africa to the Indian independence movement, they did not start at the top. They started at the grassroots level. Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King, they are our heroes. Not because they waited for some higher being up there to tell them it's okay to go ahead. No, they didn't wait. They had no more patience to wait. They took matters into their own hands. Well, we can't afford to wait either. It was in that spirit that we actually launched the R20 last year. By the way, when we looked around for a place to build our headquarters, of all the places in the world, we chose right here in Geneva. I told you, I love Switzerland. The R20 is all about action. It's all about moving forward at a subnational level instead of waiting on the sidelines. It brings together regional governments, community organizations, corporations, and educational institutions to create strong green economies around the world. The R20 will ensure that the great energy work that's being done in different parts of the world is shared with everybody. We will make sure that the people in Delhi know of the great things that are being done right here in Switzerland. We will help provinces in Morocco learn about what California has done and what kind of technology is available in California. We will make sure that the world knows about the efficient streetlights in Oslo and the biomass projects in Güssing, Austria. You see, in this way, we can address climate issues in two directions, from the bottom up and from the top down. And one day the two approaches will meet in the middle and will achieve critical mass. But to do that, we're going to have to make our green cause a little sexier, of course, and a little bit more hip, instead of using guilt and this doom and gloom approach. I don't like guilt. I think that no movement has ever been successful based on guilt. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to tell people, you shouldn't take a jacuzzi because there are greenhouse gas emissions. You shouldn't go and drive with this truck because there's greenhouse gas emissions. You shouldn't go and fly with the plane because there's CO2 emissions and all of those kind of things. And you can't tell someone who is worried about losing their job or barely holding on to their house or struggling to provide for their family that they should worry more about melting polar ice caps or rising sea levels or beetle-infested trees in Colorado. And lecturing the developing world is not any more productive. I mean, there are people around the world who are just now arriving at the petroleum party. They are as intoxicated by the desire for electronics and automobiles as we are. And the worst thing we can do is act as if we were more enlightened beings that can judge what is right and wrong. The worst thing we can say is, hey, you've been riding your bicycle for years and years and years. Don't stop. Don't buy a car, just continue riding that bicycle. It's so much better for the environment. Imagine being handed the keys to your first car and then having someone tell you, hey, leave it parked in a garage. It's so much better for the environment. Yet some in the developed nations and in the green movement have tried exactly that, to deny the pride and the happiness that people in India or in China or in Brazil are feeling in their new wealth and in their new lifestyle. That is not an effective communication strategy. We need to sell the benefits of clean, green economy so that we can create advocates, not opponents, who resent our double standard. I mean, they are not stupid. They know that we in the developed world have been driving cars for the last 100 years. They know that we in the developed world have been using fossil fuels for the last 100 years. And they also know that we in the developed nations are the ones that have created most of that pollution in the last 100 years. So rather than telling them not to do it, we should tell them to do it, but not to make the same mistakes we made. We should say, enjoy your higher standard of living and your rising prosperity. And you will enjoy it even more with green technology, like alternative fueled cars, renewable resources and energy efficient products and so on and so forth. Not to mention that you will also enjoy greater health, less death, and great economic security if you're using energy above the ground rather than below the ground. So you see, that's what we should tell them. And what is also important is that in general our communication should be like a four-legged stool. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Up until now, I feel that we have been using a wobbly one-legged stool, climate change, which clearly is not holding us. Yes, we can talk about climate change, and I'm a big believer in all the science. And I think we should talk about it, but this shouldn't be our only argument. If someone doesn't believe in climate change, does it mean that the argument is over and we have nothing to talk about anymore? No. Second leg ought to be jobs. Everyone loves to have a job. No matter where you go in the world, people love to work. And we've seen in California and right here in Switzerland and so many other places that a green economy is a growing economy that creates more jobs. Who could be against that? So let's talk about job creation when we talk about going green and going towards a green energy future. And the third leg ought to be national security, which we never talk about in this whole debate. I mean, for decades, industrialized democracies have been in a terrible position of having to purchase oil from foreign countries, often from countries that you don't want holding that power to cut off your supplies or disrupt your economies. Look what's happening right now with Iran. They don't like some of our policies here in Europe, and so therefore they say there's an oil embargo. And prices are shooting through the roof. They've basically taken us hostage. So just as the economy gets started again, and it's trying to come back, and as people have a little bit more cash in their pockets, we are ripping that cash away, and we are sending it to the Middle East. Does that make sense? Doesn't make any sense to me. So let's communicate about this, about national security. Let's go and talk about those issues rather than just talking about climate change and about rising sea levels and about the melting ice caps and those kind of things. And the fourth and the strongest leg is, of course, health. Pollution kills. It debilitates. As we meet here, countless people are struggling to just breathe. One study estimated that a staggering 40% of deaths worldwide are caused by water, air, and soil pollution. In the US alone, 100,000 people a year die from pollution-related illnesses, which is more than the combined number of traffic deaths, suicides, homicides, and our military fatalities in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So you say to yourself, why are there no protests about this? People are protesting about the wars. Why are there no protests about that? About all these millions of people that are dying because of pollution? It's because we are not telling that story. We are not communicating that. Clean energy can save lives, millions of lives, and it is our job to get that message out there. As a matter of fact, I believe that the other side is doing a better job. Those who support the status quo, those who want to continue polluting and polluting and polluting, have a very simple argument. They go straight for the gut, appealing to the people's survival instincts, that the only safe course is to do nothing. If you go green, they say that the economy will crash, prices will shoot through the roof, and you will lose your job, so people get scared. See, that's the way they communicate. I think we should be just as simple and as straightforward with our communication. We should talk to the people about things that really matter. I mean, you can have the best product in the world, as I said earlier, but if you don't communicate the proper way, no one will buy it. You have nothing. So, ladies and gentlemen, the fact is that the environmental movement and all of us that are fighting for a green energy future aren't doing a good enough job with our communication. And it is my mission to change that, because I believe a lot of it has to do with communication. And the final thing, that I want to talk to you about is you. That's right, you. You have extraordinary power. As I said earlier, you can perform miracles. If we work together, we can achieve very quickly a green energy future. I remember when I heard my father-in-law, Sergeant Schreiber, who started the Peace Corps, the Job Corps, Legal Aid to the Poor, VISTA, and all those kind of programs under the Kennedy and under the Johnson administration. He's one of my heroes. He said to the students at the Yale University, tear down that mirror. Tear down that mirror that makes you always look at yourself. And you will be able to look beyond that mirror, and you will see the millions of people that need your help. Wow. I was blown away by that. Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. And once I tore down my mirror, I couldn't stop serving. From being a special coach to the Special Olympics, or starting to build after-school programs all over the United States, or being the chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, or then eventually running for governor and serving for 7 years as governor of the great state of California. I tell you, it was so wonderful to serve the people. I don't regret 1 minute of it. And to me, this was the most satisfying moment, the most gratifying time to serve the people of California. It was wonderful. And now I want all of you to tear down your mirror and to ask what you can do. Every day I want you to ask yourself, what have I done today to reach out and to help people that need my help? What have I done, for instance, to move us towards a green energy future? Will you sit in front of the TV, watch the news and just keep complaining? Or will you do something about it? That's the question. Will you be part of the solution, or will you be part of the problem? Ask yourself that question. Reach deep down inside and embrace your tremendous power, and know that you can be a crusader for our green future. As Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. So do it. You be the change. Don't wait for other people to fight your battles. You step into the arena and you fight the battle. You fight for a green energy future. As I've said, everything starts at the grassroots level. Look what just happened with Apple. Consumers protested the conditions for the workers in China, and they improved things within a few weeks. Within a few weeks, things were changing. The Chinese government didn't tell them to change. No, it was regular consumers that did. And when there was an outrage over clothing companies and shoe companies using sweatshops and child labor, government did not fix it. It was regular people like you that stepped up and said, we are mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. Go and sell your shoes to someone else. Sell your clothes to someone else. And California is a perfect example of that. In California, we ask the people to be our partners in energy conservation. We ask each household what they could do to use less energy. Well, people love that. People love to have the power to save energy and to save money, and they love to participate and to help their state. California is now 40% more energy efficient than the rest of the United States. Think about that. Just to give you an idea what that means, because someone said today here that we don't have the technology to reduce and to achieve our goal. We have the technology, because what that means is that if the rest of the United States is as energy efficient as California, we could literally close 75% of our coal-fired power plants. Or, to make it a little bit simpler, an equivalent of taking 300 million cars off the road. Now, we don't have 300 million cars in America. We only have 240 million. But just to show to you what enormous impact that made and how successful California is because of ordinary folks participating. And this is why I said earlier, we got to bring the people into our movement, because that's people power. That's what I'm talking about. And you have that power to create change. You will show the naysayers that we are not Don Quixote embarking on some impossible romantic mission to fight enemies that don't really exist. No. We are building at windmills, we are building our windmills, and we're building windmills all over the world, spreading the freedom and the power of clean energy and an energy independence. We got to be energy independent. So the bottom line is, you are the future of our green energy movement. You are the ones that we've been waiting for. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your hospitality, and thank you for having me here in your beautiful country. I'll be back. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, Governor, you've been kind enough to say that you would take a few questions, especially from the students. We're here in a university, after all, and you challenged us to become part of people power, to become part of the solution. But I think we have some tough questions coming, because after all, our generation created this problem. The developed countries, as you mentioned, created this problem, and we're asking the developing countries to change, but we're asking the next generation to take over for us. So we thought we would just take a few minutes to get a couple questions from the students to find out what's on their mind and if they're willing to be part of that movement that you described. So I know we have a microphone here somewhere and some students that have volunteered for some questions.
Hi.
Got a microphone over there.
Hi.
If it's working. Just stand up and tell us your
Okay.
name.
So,
Stand up and tell us your name.
I'm Jeffrey, like a student in international relations here in the University of Geneva. And I got a question to you, Governor, that is based on what you did in California, which raised awareness among students and all around the world, I hope. How do you see students to engage in sustainable development? Here is my question.
Well, I think that you're absolutely correct. I think that because California is a place that the whole world looks at, because it's you know, the most important state in the United States. It is what it is. If you think about that, California is the 8th largest economy in the world. So we should actually be at the G8 meeting. But we are not allowed because, you know, the president is representing us, so, which is perfectly fine. But I'm just trying to show to you that how big California is and how important it is. So when California, you know, screws up, then the world knows about it immediately. But also if California does something well, like for instance with our AB 32, where we made a commitment, you know, to reduce our CO2 output by 25% by the year 2020 and 85% by the year 2050. Headlines went all around the world. And so it is very important for us. It's also, when you look at the map, a little place. It's not a giant place. But it's important that we use our power of influence worldwide. And so we used that and promoted green energy and the green energy future from California to inspire the rest of the world. And that's why the UN Secretary General had me speak at the UN. Because he said to me, you got to come to our headquarters and speak from there to all of the 200 countries. Talk to them about, inspire them to go in that direction of what you did in California. And so I think that the way we did it, as I said in my speech, we had the people power kick in. We communicated with the people and said, without you, we cannot do it. And we asked the people to do certain things. And because of that, it was easier for us. But this was not done by me. May I remind you, that was done already 30 years ago. As a matter of fact, I think Jerry Brown, who is now governor of California, has already started that in the 70s. So this has been a long process. It's not from one day to the next. You know, you got to bring people in and you got to convince them that solar is the way to go. You got to convince them that wind is the way to go. And so in California, we have now started building, you know, the biggest solar plants in the world. As a matter of fact, there's this competition between California and China. You know, one year you hear China say, we just built the biggest solar plant in the world. Then California comes right back and says, no, we now built the biggest solar plant in the world. And that's how, but it just shows the extraordinary work that's done. And that's why I said in my speech that we got to include the academic world in all of this, because, and you know, we got to go and start already from early on, from childhood on, kindergarten through 12th grade, or all the way up through college. We got to educate the people and tell them about what is going on in the world and the danger that is existing if we don't do something about it. But we have it at the same time, we have to make it attractive enough so that young people get drawn to it. And that's why I say we got to make it a little bit more hip, rather than always using the guilt and beating up on people, making them feel guilty and threatening them that the world is coming to an end if we don't do something right away. Because I don't think that alone works. I think we got to make it attractive. And if you look at the cell phones, there was no one 20 years ago that said, no government agency, no international pact or contract or a deal that was made that said that in 20 years from now, 4 billion people have to be able to communicate with each other. But that's exactly what happened. Started out with this enormous cell phone that felt like you're holding a brick in your hand, and it was $1,600. And just a week ago, when my daughter called me and said she lost her cell phone, I went to the store with her, and within a half an hour, she got her cell phone, and it cost absolutely nothing. You just had to buy the services, and that was it. So it just shows you the changes. Now 4 billion people. When I was in Nigeria, I saw people walking around with 1 and 2 cell phones, but they didn't even have electricity. They didn't even have flashing toilets or anything like that, but they had cell phones. So that's what I'm talking about. Everyone now is participating. Everyone is part of that communication. And that's what we want to do with the environmental movement also. Make people buy in and become part of it. And especially it's important that the students participate in this whole thing and they become the crusaders also. Okay?
A great answer. And Governor, before we take one more question from one of our students, before we take one more question from one of our students, I do want, before everybody leaves here tonight, I want to make sure that they know how to get involved with the R20, how to answer your call to action. So you mentioned our executive director who's based here in Geneva, Christoph Nuttall. Raise your hand so you can go grab him. And right behind him from R20 USA is Jill Gravender. She can raise her hand. And Chris Haddad, who's right there next to her. Our great team from California. Give them also a big hand. And if you're interested in participating in Brazil, our R20 Brazil director is right here, Jorge Machado. Raise your hand. So there's all kinds of people here in the audience tonight who can tell you how to get involved and how to become part of that solution. So let's take one more question from one of our students. Let's make sure she has a microphone.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming here to the university. I just wanted to say my disappointed because I waited during 2 hours in front of the doors, and as you said, we have to tear down the mirror and not stop looking at ourselves. And you quoted so many times California. I'm wondering why you said that. And I want to know what can we do, because you said we have to take action. We have to stop. We don't have to wait. But I was hoping for some advices, something we can actually do. As one of your colleagues said, we're in time 2.0. Maybe we have to go to 3.0 and say what can we do instead of saying do something. And maybe stop driving Hummers, although they're green Hummers. Maybe do something instead of saying to do something. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's why I said earlier that you should ask yourself, what do you do? Ask yourself that every day. Like, for instance, tomorrow, when we do the press conference at the auto show, and we go to the Green Pavilion, we want to show to the people that they don't have to buy a car that only uses gasoline. There are alternative fueled cars right now available. And if this is hydrogen, if it is electric battery cars, hybrid cars, and so on and so forth, so they don't have to go and fall for that trap of rising gasoline prices at the pump. So that's what you can do. So when you go out and you buy your next car, you should know that there's 50 different cars out there that are alternative fueled cars. You can contribute a lot if you buy one of those cars rather than the other cars. The second thing you can do is, I mentioned the example on purpose about the street lights. That in Oslo, 70% of reduction in energy because they changed the street lights. Now think about how easy that is. Now you have to ask yourself, okay, if they can do it, then maybe I should go out and look for lights in my apartment and switch out the lights and make them energy efficient lights that only use 10% of the energy rather than 100% of the energy. So, or for instance, at my house in California, I had used my hill to build solar panels there so that the house gets the energy from the solar panels rather than from the grid. So there's, you know, and then it made the changes with the Hummers and all those kinds of, so everyone, or like I taught my kids to turn out the lights every time you walk out of the room, which in Europe in most cases you do anyway, because I remember when I was a kid, you know, my mother always made me turn out the lights because here people are naturally more energy efficient. But the bottom line is there's a lot of little things that we can do that really contribute. And you got to be able to answer that every night when you look in the mirror and they say, I have done X, Y, and Z in order to help this movement to get us towards a green energy future, and also to be an activist. Because as I said, that you saw, you know, just recently changes that consumers created. So you can go and write to the car companies, you can write to various different companies and create green products that will also help. So if everyone participates in this movement, we can, as I said, create miracles in the future.
And thank you, Governor. And I have to tell one little story on the governor, and he's mentioned this publicly before, so I think it's okay for me to tell you that he not only would harass his kids to turn off the lights if they left them on, but he would take the light bulbs from the lights if he left them on. So at some point, if they did it often enough, they would sit in the dark. So that's another way that our students can participate. If someone's leaving the lights on, just take the light bulbs. But one other way, Governor, which you exemplified, and we'll close on this note, is that, look, you can participate in government. That's one of the things that I think everybody here should take away from this message. If you think about all the things that you could do in your career, all the opportunities that you had, and instead you chose to serve, you chose to go work in Sacramento, and a lot of people criticized you, a lot of people said it wasn't enough or it wasn't good enough, but you did it, and you continue to do it. I mean, even now, you could be off doing other things and you're doing movies, but you're still serving the public in this way. And I think that's fantastic, and that's a great example. Get involved in government. A lot of people say government's not so great or government's the problem, but you've proven, I think, that at least in this case, government is the solution. So people ought to get involved and get involved in their government.
Well, you're absolutely right, but I mean, there's just so many things that you can do, and you know, you see people always sitting in front of the TV or reading the paper, reading a magazine and say, oh, this is terrible. I mean, look at the economy. This is terrible. Look at how they, you know, pollute the world. This is terrible. And look at the street gangs here, like in Los Angeles. Look at the street gangs. That's terrible. And I say, well, what do you do about it? If you don't like the street gangs, the reason why they are street gangs, because they don't have parents in the afternoon to take care of them, to supervise them. So that's why I went out and created after-school programs in all the major cities in the United States so that we can keep those kids that are in danger because they don't have parents waiting for them when they get out of the school, and take care of them and help them with their homework and with their academic work and give them sports programs and fitness programs and academic stuff and all those kind of things. So I did something about it. rather than complaining and say, oh my God, the gangs, they kill each other, isn't it terrible, and all the drugs. So we are out there on a crusade to say no to gangs, no to violence, no to drugs, and yes to education, and yes to life. So we do something about it. So what I'm saying is instead of complaining, are you the one that is complaining and saying, oh, someone else is going to do it? Yes, someone else may be doing it, but wouldn't it be much better if you help right along the way? I mean, we got to take care of our country, of our community. That's just the way it is. And I think that instead of waiting for government to do everything, which I think is almost impossible for government to do everything, I've said there, it's overwhelming. I think it is good when people participate, and that's why I used that example of Californian people just doing simple things like helping with saving energy, and therefore the state is, as you know, you were with the EPA, you were the head of it, is 40% more energy efficient. So it's just basically reminding you that each and every one of you has tremendous powers of influence. Use that power. That's why we have it. Use it.
And by the way, I love the fact that when we checked into our hotel, the person who checked us in said, would you like a free bus pass? And so they offered that, yes. So we do need cars, but isn't it great to be in a country where they have such great mass transit? Well, on that note, Governor, I think you've inspired everyone, but since you come from politics, you understand the power of polls, of taking a poll. So let's take a poll right now. I want to see a show of hands. How many of you are going to go out of here tonight committed to doing something, committed to tearing down the mirror and making sure that you're part of the solution? Let's see the show of hands. All right, on that note, I think it's a successful poll. Congratulations. Please say thank you to Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger.